this video, we're going to talk about deciding what kind of HR tech you need to buy. There is so much out there, and we all know that making the wrong decision can be so painful. Stay tuned for some insight. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams, host of HR Shop Talk. We talk about all things HR here. I encourage you to subscribe to the show or podcast to keep learning from my guests. Today, my guest is again Phil Strazzulla. Phil is the founder of Select Software Reviews. He helps us HR people buy our HR tech, and he gives all this information away for free. It's really quite amazing. Hi, Phil. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good. So we're going to talk about tech. Looking forward to this one. The last one was so useful. But, I mean, there's just so much out there. So to sort of bring the conversation in a bit, what are the two HR tech solutions that you're asked about most often?
That's a good question. I think they're probably applicant tracking systems and HRIS, kind of basic HR software.
Okay. All right. So we'll sort of contain our conversation to HRIS and ATSs. So you provide advice on those. What is the case for buying an HRIS versus buying individual pieces that might work better for each function but don't integrate well?
So the basic trade-off is that in buying an HRIS versus buying maybe 4 or 5 other solutions is obviously a heck of a lot easier. Everything integrates. It's one vendor, one procurement process, one implementation, one system to learn.
Of course.
And it's usually cheaper too, because you are sort of getting volume discounting, I guess is the right way to think about it. The trade-off is that you're usually not getting the super powerful point solutions. So there are companies that have absolutely phenomenal performance management systems or interview scheduling systems or kind of you name it. Mm-hmm. And if your company, for whatever reason, needs that sort of power, you're going to have to buy a point solution. There's really no sort of HCM suite / HRIS / whatever you want to call it that has super, super powerful of these kind of check the box solutions. Their business strategy is to be an all-in-one so that somebody says, you've got time and attendance, you've got performance, you've got whatever. But the performance management it's going to be, an annual survey that goes out to a couple of people. It's not going to be anything compared to what you might get through Culture Ramp or Lattice or 15.5.
So, you're surfing around on HR sites and you'll see so many ads for what you call these point solutions. And there'd have to be a pretty amazing case. Like, who are they marketing their stuff to?
Yeah. If you're an HR team of one, you might be looking at one point solution for something that's really, really important for your company for whatever reason. They're really looking at the larger and faster growing companies. So obviously, Global Fortune 5000, they're going to have tons of these different point solutions. It's actually sometimes comical. Like you can talk to somebody that they might even have like 2 or 3 ATSs, let alone, performance management and all this other stuff. And then there's these companies that many of which are venture-backed businesses. They're growing really quickly. They have high conviction that people is what's going to make them successful or not. And so they're willing to invest in tools that will allow them to attract or retain people. And It's not uncommon for a 50-person venture-backed company to have 2 dedicated recruiters plus 1 or 2 people on the people ops side. And so a fairly meaningful percentage of people actually that are working at this company are just focused on people ops and recruiting. And those people are going to need sourcing tools. They're going to need dedicated onboarding solutions, et cetera. And so those are really the big target markets for these point solution, because to your point, if you're a 100-person company, 1 HR person, you're not going to invest in Culture Ramp. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Okay. So you've got exposure to this, and this is maybe a question I might include, I might not, but all these organizations that you see growing, they're venture backed or whatever, and they've got a strong people focus. Are they more successful than the ones that aren't, or that are less people focused?
How do you define success?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge question. However you want to define success, are they continue to grow, and and they've got a great trajectory for growth and income.
Yeah, a lot of them are. So I started my career off working in venture capital,
Mm,
helping to fund these companies. And
right?
of course, many of these companies never make it, right? There's
Yes.
probably, 60, 70% of them kind of never make it to even $1 million in revenue. But the ones that do make it to some level of product market fit, and that's really the key to whether or not these businesses succeed, is do they have something that people want?
Mm,
If you think about it, if the worst run company in the world came up with the iPod back in whatever that was, 2000, they would still be extremely rich and successful.
okay.
It so happened that a well-run company did it, and it became the most valuable company in the world, and they used that to get into phones and other consumer electronics. But it's really a matter of product market fit. Now, people can be an accelerant; they can make something go a lot faster, and that's basically the bet that these companies are making. And the reason they're making that bet is because their board members, the venture capitalists, have seen the same movie play out over and over again over decades, over hundreds of different companies, where if you get the right head of sales in there, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to sell the product. If you get the right head of engineering, et cetera. And how do you do that? You create a great culture, you create great incentive systems with the right compensation, the right equity. You create a structure where they have freedom, that they can sort of exercise their entrepreneurial muscles while also helping the company grow, all these different things that at the end of the day, they come back to people operations and people management. And so I think that the short answer to your question is, yeah, that these companies are a lot more successful, and they become the Googles and the Apples of the world.
I want to talk about helping people make these decisions. So, what are some frameworks that people can use for making their own purchasing of HR tech decision?
Sure. So I think the first place you need to start is where to focus. There's so many different solutions out there. I think there's literally 30,000 different HR tools that exist right now in their ETSs and HRISs and everything in between.
Right.
There's a few different frameworks that I use. One is talk to other people in the organization. What is driving the board's decisions? What's driving sort of the executive level compensation? Is it increased profitability? Is it growing the sales team? Is it, product changes, et cetera? How does people make an impact on that? How does HR make an impact? And that's where you should focus on your initiatives broadly, but really your tools as well. So great example might be, hey, we've got call center, super high churn, increasing costs. We need to fight this increase. How do we decrease this? We need to have better onboarding. We need to tell a better story at the top of the funnel, employer branding, to make sure people know what they're getting themselves into. Let's get a new career site. Let's get a better onboarding process. All this stuff is tools that backs up the HR initiatives and makes them more successful. So that's number one, is talking to people in the organization, understanding what does the org care about right now? How does people make an impact? Number two is mapping your employee lifecycle. So I've talked to a couple companies that have literally set up 100 8x11 pieces of paper taped together on a wall. And it's like, okay, first interaction is you meet somebody at a bar that works here, or you go on Glassdoor, or you go on our career website, and then there's this, and you can get really granular. I talked to a guy that he used to work at Amazon. He now works at a travel tech company, and he had, I think, 270 different points of contact throughout the employee life cycle that he mapped. And you can start to think about what are the ones that really matter that we're not very good at. Maybe it's offer management. Maybe it's making sure that you have an interview panel that represents the company, and maybe has somebody that kind of looks like you. If it's a woman, candidate. Let's make sure that there's somebody who's a woman who's interviewing them, etc. So you can figure out where to focus from that perspective. The last one, which is sort of like the easiest one, and some people might say it's the laziest, but I think it's probably the most effective, is to trust your gut. You're taking in data all day long from conversations, from everything that's happening on a subconscious level, and we're actually really good at figuring out what we should be focused on. And so in the back of your mind, or your gut, whatever you want to call it, the thing that you realize is the most important thing, that's probably the most important thing. And you should then sort of on a conscious level rationalize, why this is, and maybe create a business case, et cetera, kind of back it up. But that's a really good place to figure out where to focus. So those are my three frameworks.
You do have to be able to rationalize it, though, because if you can't, then you don't have anything to sell. It's like, I just feel like this is the best one. Your finance guy is probably not going to buy into that.
Probably not. And if it's not successful, they'll never give you budget again.
Right.
Which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So what questions should we be asking the software vendors when we go to test their product or get a demo?
I think you want to drill into the workflows that really matter to you. These are the workflows that work in your current product, and probably the ones that don't work as well, that sort of drive people crazy.
Right.
You want to drill into integrations, drill into, again, what does an integration mean? Does it mean that you got to download a CSV and upload it? That's not very good. Does it mean that there's an API there? That's the much better integration. You want to understand who's going to be my account manager. I tend to ask questions like, how has that person incentivized? Tell me about other companies that have gone through this prior.
Right.
You want to talk to a reference or two, and you want to ask questions that are like weirdly specific and hard to prepare for, because that's going to get you real answers and real data. I hate relying on an N of one to understand a solution, whether that's a salesperson or an online review or the reference. But all of these things are data points, and they help you kind of triangulate into what's the solution that's right for us. And I think if there are peer companies that you respect that are all using something, that's a really strong data point as well. Right. If you've been in HR for a while, you probably have 3 or 4 people that you really respect. And if all those people are using a new, comp management platform, that's probably the right one for you.
All right. If this has helped you, subscribe to see all the episodes and comment. What questions do you ask HR tech vendors? Let us know in the comment section. This question actually comes from Google, and I know it's like super broad. Do what you can with it. But what should be included in HR software? So if I'm going to go out and buy it, what should I expect to receive with that software?
So it depends on your budget and how big your company is. But I think at the very least, you're going to be looking at a database that's sort of like your employee database. It's going to have some sort of integration with payroll solution or have its own payroll solution so you can run payroll through it. It's going to have some sort of employee experience module. So it's going to allow you to maybe run some pulse surveys, do some performance management stuff. It's probably not going to be the full like soup to nuts, peer-to-peer recognition or total rewards or anything like that. But it should have those basic things in it. And you might also be looking at something that has some sort of recruiting aspect as well, or applicant tracking system, sort of lightweight, job distribution, blasted out to Indeed and Monster and stuff like that. Right. So that's kind of like the most baseline stuff. I think that the next level here is really, that sort of describes maybe the solutions of like 10, 15 years ago. The next evolution from that was easy UI. So something that is intuitive, that doesn't take somebody 6 months to learn. the next evolution from that is really where we're at today, which is more strategic functionality. So there is a great solution called ChartHop, which actually started as an org chart creator, and it allowed you to run these like scenarios. So it's like, hey, if we get that big partnership, our org chart's going to look like this. If if we lose this partnership, we're going to look like this. If we do this M&A deal, blah blah blah. And so it sort of has this like strategic workforce planning aspect to it. And I think that some of these more modern, super-powered HRISs and full HCM suites will have stuff like that in it. Okay. You might also get some pretty decent employee engagement functionality. So the ability to run some sentiment analysis. And this is really where we're sort of now on the precipice of leveraging artificial intelligence to do some stuff in these systems as well. So I think, back in the day, it was like, it's a database, it has like some functionality, it's a really pretty database, it's a pretty database with some strategic functionality. And now it's like, this is a piece of software that's going to be able to do some stuff for you automatically. And so an example of that could be in onboarding, making sure that an employee is getting connected with the right people. So maybe your employee comes in and it's a female engineer. It's like, okay, let's make sure that this person works with senior engineering folks, as well as female engineering folks. Oh, they're not responding to this person. This connection was never made. Let's make sure we follow up on that. And it's sort of this like somewhat smart machine that can figure out where the ball might be being dropped and try to pick up.
Okay. And I'm sure people want to talk about negotiating price. Do you have any tips about how to negotiate the cost of any of these pieces of HR tech?
Sure. I think the number one thing that internalize at first is that you can and should negotiate. Almost all of these prices are very negotiable, even if there's pricing on the website. I've seen applicant tracking systems that are $1,500 a year that I thought there's no way anybody could negotiate that. Somebody get it for $1,000 a year. So there's always room, especially at the end of the month or the end of the quarter or the end of the year, to get these deals done.
Why do you say, sorry if I can jump in, why do you say end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year? Why do you say there's perhaps more opportunity at those times?
So individuals are trying to hit certain numbers to get their bonuses.
Right.
And companies are trying to hit certain numbers so that the VP of sales, CEO can get their bonuses, or they might be trying to impress their venture capital board members so that next year they can raise money at a higher price. Right. And if you're able to end the year at 10 million revenue run rate versus even 8.5, that's a big difference in terms of your valuation going forward. That can impact the equity value a lot. And so people are willing to make concessions around those times. And what also happens is that the best salespeople, or really the best buyers of software, create a competitive dynamic where the salesperson knows that they are competing for this business, and they know that the other person, it's the end of their quarter too, they're probably going to be able to do a little bit. And so they want to preemptively say, look, if you take this, if you sign this by the end of the week, we can do 20% off, sort of thing. Right. Some other tricks are signing multi-year contracts, paying up front, going after one-time fees like implementation. The rationale there is that most of these SaaS businesses are valued on a recurring revenue basis. And so one-time fees don't really impact the enterprise value, and therefore they're not in the comp plans. So if there's an implementation fee, many times you can kind of scratch that off. And paying up front, sort of like giving them a loan. Maybe it doesn't matter for you if you pay up front for a year or two or three. But for them, it could matter a lot, especially if they're a business that needs to raise venture capital money. So all these little things can really help you drive a lot of value. Something I mentioned in our previous interview, which I think is probably the best tip that I've ever heard of, and now I use it egregiously and share it, is to send a spreadsheet of the vendors that you're looking at to each of the vendors, and just say, basically, the implication, the spreadsheet you should send is, here are my criteria, here's how you stack up. Hey, are these notes accurate? But the implication is, and I'm talking to these 3 other companies,
right? And
therefore, you better give me a good price. So that can drive a lot of value.
Okay, final question. So what's 1 or 2 things that people often overlook in this selection process, but they shouldn't?
I think one of the things most people screw up is internal stakeholder management and getting people on board pretty early in the process. A lot of people will spend time talking to vendors and they don't have the budget, or they don't have the info security person signed off, or the head of marketing, or whoever is the relevant stakeholder that they really need. And so upfront, I recommend you outlining, here's what I'm going to do, here's why I'm going to do it, here are what I think the results will be, and here's how those results translate into dollars and cents, and get the right people on board from the get-go, keep them informed, let them know, your process, all the work that you're doing, and make sure that at the end of the day, they're going to back you to do this and then help you implement it too. So that's something that I think a lot of people will gloss over. I think the other thing that people don't do enough is to question the advice that they get. So many people give bad advice. I think unfortunately, there are very few people that understand this landscape of HR technology, and it's changing so quickly every single day. And people say, yeah, we use this vendor, it's great. And many times, if you dig into those recommendations, what do you like about it? Why don't you really use the tool? It's really my colleague. Like, I can't deal with that tool, honestly. Like, it's a pain in the neck. Oh, okay, so it's actually not great. These are conversations that I have all the time, because I'm always trying to learn. And many times when you dig 1 or 2 levels deeper, we have this blog post that says, buy HR tech like a toddler. Always asking why, like sort of a little bit of like an annoying thing, but always dig deeper. If a salesperson or one of your colleagues says something, really question that assumption. We got pitched this recruiting solution that said, we're the #1 source of hire for these 50 companies. And I said, what do you mean by #1? Well, we drive the most high quality volume. Oh, okay. How do you measure quality? Well, it has to do with the conversion rates of blah, blah, blah. Oh, how did you get that data? And asking 3 or 4 questions, it became clear that what happened was, one time, one of their customers in a meeting mentioned that they think that this basically job board is a really good source of traffic. And that became the headline for their entire pitch, as if they had all this information behind it. And it worked. Like, they had a lot of logos, but they had a lot of churn. And they had a lot of customers that were with them for a year and said, this is terrible, I'm out. But I think if you asked that why, you would get there and you wouldn't be fooled by their sales pitch.
Excellent advice for really, buying a lot of things. Okay, thanks, Phil. That was so great, and I really appreciate all of that advice. Phil and I also talked about prepping to buy an HRIS, and a link to that's right here. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.